Hi friends, and welcome to a transit chart reading. I'm Sarah, and I'm going to be briefly describing what we're looking at here, and then getting into describing this major astrological event that is occurring. Before we get started, you'll notice I have the clock set to August 1st, 2022 at 3:10 a.m. in Pensacola, Florida. And I have it set at that time and my location so that I can show you what it looks like on a transit chart when these planets and points align. It would be a different time, of course, depending on where you are in the world, but that's a different discussion. So, the major astrological event that's occurring is a conjunction between Uranus, Mars, and the North Node. A conjunction is when planets and points line up in the sky from our geocentric or earthly perspective. The North Node is a calculated point that is a lunar node, and at these eclipse points, at these nodal points is where eclipses occur. So this is a zodiacal wheel. You might know your zodiac sign and maybe none of the other ones, but they are in order here. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer here on the ascendant line. So you might have heard of a rising sign or an ascendant. And that is the area of the sky within which the rising sun is seen. So basically, these zodiacal signs are navigation orientation. They tell us what part of the sky we're looking at. So Cancer, the constellation, will be in this area of the sky. It does not necessarily take up this entire area in reality, but for the purposes of astrology, when you're using traditional techniques like Hellenistic astrology, you'll use what's called whole sign houses, and it breaks each of these zodiacal signs into a 30-degree segment of this entire wheel of 360 degrees. In other words, Cancer has 30 degrees of the sky, Leo has 30 degrees of the sky, Virgo has 30 degrees of the sky, and they all are presiding over a house. So you'll notice there's 12 houses, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And each of those houses is representative of an area of life that can be for the collective or for an individual, because as above, so below. We'll experience these archetypes, and they are archetypes, so that's important to mention too. This is an archetypal language. It's an art form, and it was never intended to be a science until Ptolemy got a hold of it. And after that point, it was completely ridiculed. Now, one of my favorite ways to think about astrology is that idea of not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So there is wisdom that was accumulated over thousands of years by our ancestors and passed down to us with purpose. They carved this into walls, they painted it so that we would find these tools for life. And because life is cyclical, they could be sure that we would experience similar life events. So anyway, astrology is evolutionarily relevant. Okay, now that I have discussed the chart, in the middle here, these are aspect lines. So these describe the orientation of planets to one another. So for instance, we have the moon here in a trine. I'm just going to isolate the moon. I'm just going to click it there. And you'll see this green line with a triangle on it. That means there's a trine. So interestingly enough, the moon will be trining this triple conjunction that I was mentioning at the beginning of the video. So that's a lot of words. That just means that the moon is roughly 120 degrees from that triple conjunction. So if you know a circle, it's actually like 119 degrees or maybe 121. I don't know which way the math goes, but this is nearly 120 degrees. And so a trine is going to be anything within a 3-degree orb. An orb is just a few degrees before, a few degrees after. So here, this is a trine. This is a trine because 19 degrees falls within that 3-degree orb. It could be 19, 20, 21, 22 degrees, or it could be 17, 18, 19, and maybe 16 degrees. Okay. There's also oppositions, which are opposite side of the wheel. So of course that's 180 degrees. There are also squares that are 90 degrees from one another. Okay, and so on. So these aspect lines are descriptive of the way in which these planets kind of interact with one another or work together or butt heads, you could say. And again, all archetypal. They are actually not arguing up in the sky. Okay, so now for the meat that I've given you, the potatoes and the peas. The triple conjunction here, I'm again highlighting that specifically. Triple, right? There's 3. So what's the 3? Uranus, Mars, and the North Node. Again, the North Node is just a mathematical point that's calculated and is where the eclipses occur. So if the moon and the sun are in these places or together at one of them, there's either a lunar or a solar eclipse. Now, when we look at a transit chart, we are looking at the planets, the placement of those planets, you know, which house they fall into and which sign is ruling over that house. And then we look at the aspect lines of the planets to one another. So here with Mars and Uranus and the North Node, we'll start with Mars because the ancients actually had Mars to work with. Not to say that they didn't have the true node as well, but they definitely didn't have Uranus. So that's something that we discovered later. So Mars is a masculine or young energy. It is domineering. It's an initiator. It is fast action. It's a fire sign. It's a yang sign. So lots of divide and conquer literally through cutting. So Mars is associated with cutting, separating by cutting. And combined with Uranus, which is this planet that is associated with revolution, rebellion, transformation, shocking transformation. So it's abrupt. It's something that happens quickly. And so you can already sense just from those descriptions that Mars and Uranus together is kind of explosive and can be violent, but can also be a nice release if, you know, this energy that's come to a head that is now just exploding, kind of like a volcano. Yeah, with Mars and Uranus together. And here's the thing, like Mars and Uranus meet up every year or every 2 years because Mars's orbit is such that Mars catches up to Uranus about every 2 years. Again, from our geocentric perspective. So they're kind of in the same area of the sky, Mars and Uranus. But this time, they're meeting at this eclipse point, at the North Node. As eclipses do, adding fuel to this reactive, explosive, shocking revelation. And this can happen in any area of your chart, depending on your time of birth and your rising sign. So, as you see here, for somebody with a Cancer rising, this is going to be happening in their 11th house of networks. The first house is going to be your personality, the mask that you wear to interact with other people. This second house here is our values and our property, everything except for real estate. So the things that we find value in, to include our self-worth. Then third house is going to be our small communities around us, so neighbors, siblings, anybody that we interact with on a day-to-day basis, and all the communication that goes along with that, whether it's transportation, short distance travel, our cars, things like that are associated with the third house, and especially communication. The fourth house here, this segment, is our home, our roots, our family. Our fifth house is pleasure, joy, and actually children, because of course pleasure is what results in children. Then the sixth house is routines, day to day. This is, arduous labor. This is service. This is the house of slavery. So this is whatever you kind of commit your day to day to, your routine. And this can even be to do with the body and the health of the body. Seventh house is relationships, partnerships. Eighth house is death, taxes, other people's money. Ninth house is going to be philosophy, higher education, and foreign travel. 10th house is the house of career or debut into society. And as I said earlier, the 11th house is networks, organizations that we're a part of. And the 12th house is the house of self-undoing. It is the house of bad spirit. And all that sounds terrible, but it's really to do with the mind and all the realms that we can't see. So spiritual realm, the thought realm, this house has a lot to do with mental health. It can be to do with prisons, retreats, anything that requires isolation or forces us into isolation. So those are the many areas within which this triple conjunction can fall in your chart. Okay, so I just want to mention some of these aspect lines. This whole thing is square to Saturn. Remember, because 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. This is just outside the orb of being a square. But there's still going to likely be some influence by Saturn. Saturn is this planet also of separation, actually. But Saturn is associated with things that are old and cold and antique. And what does that mean? Well, Saturn usually makes us wait. Saturn is this planet of restriction. It will make you wait for the reward. So with Saturn here in a square to Uranus, well, Uranus, this planet of revolution, rebellion, and Saturn, this planet of restriction and status quo and things staying the same, tradition. So Saturn's very conservative. It kind of gets a bad rap, to be very honest with you. Oh, okay. So my really good friend and colleague has a saying about Saturn, which is Saturn delays but never denies. So it's important to recognize the gifts that Saturn gives us, which is the payoff from hard work. Okay, so there's a tense aspect here between those two. It's Saturn square to this triple conjunction. So yeah, there's like this tension that's building up that has the capacity to explode. However, there is this sextile with Venus as well. So Venus is this planet of harmony and love, and people associate Venus with the feminine. She is yin, accepting, to do with beauty. So Venus, in fact, is the ruler of the house within which these planets and points are falling in. So the triple conjunction is happening in Taurus, and Taurus is ruled by Venus. And this is very important because Venus and her dignity is going to be descriptive of how this whole thing goes down. It is describing the environment within which the triple conjunction is taking place. So Venus is happy in Cancer because Cancer is this also feminine yin sign. Cancer is the protective mother, soft on the inside and hard on the outside, just like a crab, which is, a great way to remember some of the significations of Cancer. But Venus is very happy in Cancer. She can move through and feel that love and acceptance that we, seek out from our mother, from nourishment. Um, so a lot of harmonious energy here in Cancer with Venus ruling over Taurus. So that's adding in some area of your life a little assistance with quelling this humongous explosion that wants to be released. So, the advice here isn't to conceal or try to, hold in all of that explosive energy, but it may be to figure out, which area of life this is happening for you, and then work with these energies in that way. So for instance here, like if I was looking at this chart and this was somebody's, natal chart, or at least the zodiacal wheel was set up the same way, because it's going to change depending on your rising sign. If I was to look at this for somebody with a Cancer rising, it goes something like there's going to be explosive revolution in your house that's associated with networks. There's something's going to come to a head. This could look like, something being that was hidden within an organization coming to a head. Okay, so for instance, I'm thinking of Alex Jones having to file for bankruptcy with InfoWars. Not necessarily that that's the case, but it was just kind of like this thing with the Sandy Hook trial, and it all came to a head, and he's now having to lay off people, and of course the business isn't going to be able to pay its employees and things like that. So the network is kind of disrupted here. It's something huge for them. And for this native, not Alex Jones, but for this native Cancer rising, we have Venus here in the first house. So it would say, this says to me, okay, and so actually I want to go here to Saturn first. So, because we need to deal with all the drama. So in the 11th house, and this is to do with other people's money. Imagine that. Okay, so that was a great example, Alex Jones, bankruptcy, other people's money, so debt, taxes, those things kind of fall into inheritance, falls into the 8th house as well. Yeah, I like that example of, your business, your big organization is going bankrupt. I don't like that idea. I hope that that's not the case for you, but just like as far as like an archetypal example, it kind of works. And okay, well, how would Alex Jones or InfoWars deal with this? I just don't. Anyway, okay. To be harmonious in their persona, to, I don't foresee Alex Jones apologizing necessarily. But that would be kind of the advice here, is to be gentle, be in your yin, kind of sitting in the stillness, allowing things to come to you. Right? That just sounds like, oh, what terrible advice for somebody that's going through this. But it's like when you sit through the storm, things are going to occur as they would anyway. So you just wait for the dust to settle. All right, so that's a transit chart. That's kind of how you do a reading. It was very all over the place, but I hope that that's helpful, and I hope that you are well during this triple conjunction. All right, I'll try this again some other time. Bye, guys.